And I'm now recording. Top of the hour. I'm still seeing relatively few attendees. I'll wait a little while longer. Then we can begin. If they come in during the introduction, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
About another 30 seconds. Okay, well, I'll go ahead then. Good evening. Welcome to the second to last of our World FM Day sessions, series of 18 of them held over 31 hours. This is David Reynolds, your host, substituting for Joshua Amos tonight. And tonight we have Martin Leitch, integrating FM into the design and build process. Sounds like a very traditional sort of FM activity, but puts quite a lively twist on it, really. Next slide. Good. We'll use polls briefly through the webinar. Other than that, we will provide, the webinar is being recorded. We'll provide that on fmcc.ifma.org after a respectable interval. Next slide. Just a reminder of what FMCC is all about. We're, of course, a council within IFMA, and our vision is as a resource and a voice for FM consultants worldwide, and we are indeed worldwide, especially during these events. And our mission is to serve the global facility management consultant community, and that includes really quite a diversity of activities and interests. Next slide. So in that connection, we can help. We regularly publish in Facility Management Journal, Ask the Expert. For members, we have ways of finding, and for other FMs who wish to inquire, we have ways of finding consultants, locate a speaker, online resources, and so on. Next slide. We are sponsored, and we're grateful to the 5 sponsors, 6 actually shown here, for sustaining our operations. Next slide. And so welcome to World FM Day 2016. Next slide. This is the group that put together the event. We're very grateful for all of the presenters and contributors who really did most of the heavy lifting. We just patched it all together. Next slide. And here's the course of events during the last now 29 hours. You can see the span of this. We're nearly completed with the cycle going around the globe. Next slide. And the speakers, quite a raft of them actually, and of course the moderator group again. Next slide. I'm hosting today's presentations. David Reynolds. I'm a facility management consultant based in Mississippi in the U.S. Next slide. And here we have our presenter. Martin, I'm going to let you take it from here. Talk a little bit about yourself, and then move on into what you're doing.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here.
So it's a good afternoon from Australia. I think we've got, in terms of attendees so far, 1 in Australia, 1 in New Zealand, and Gay, I presume you're in North America somewhere, and I guess that'll be a good evening to you. First of all, thanks to IFMA for the invitation to present to you this afternoon. Really appreciate it. Just very briefly, I'm originally from Scotland. and emigrated to Australia here in 2004 to set up what we call an RTO, which is a registered training organisation. So I developed a diploma programme in facilities management, and about 18 months ago moved on from that to get back into consultancy, which is an area that I'm, I guess, most interested in terms of using my own expertise. My primary focus is working with end-user corporate facility management teams to help them with their FM strategy, service delivery and outsourcing, and their contract lifecycle. As it says there, I'm a member of the RICS, fellow of the British Institute of Facilities Management, and as of the beginning of this year I joined IFMA as well. So I'm particularly interested in the prospect of the collaboration between RICS and IFMA, and really looking forward to seeing where that's going to take us. So it'll be pretty interesting. Anyway, on with the show. Excuse me. So this afternoon, the learning objectives really fourfold. First of all, understand how FM can add value to design and construction processes, and understand what barriers exist to increasing to an increased FM involvement. Identify what needs to happen to make any changes that are necessary, and I do believe there are some. And then understand the changing role of technology during a building's life cycle. So those are the four main areas that we're going to be talking about. But before we get into that, I really just want to share a bit of a story about, and I'm sure we've all got them, I'm sure you've all got little stories about real bloomers as far as design is concerned, in terms of being able to maintain your buildings. Lights in the wrong places, valves in the wrong places, pieces of plant that are totally inaccessible, difficulty in cleaning windows, etc., etc., etc. But I thought I'd just share a story from my past back in Scotland before I moved out here in 2004. As I said, I was heavily involved with the regional committee of the British Institute of Facilities Management, and every month we had basically a visit to different buildings. So it was our sort of monthly event where I had an opportunity to network, to have a look at buildings, to hear what's going on in the world of FM. This particular evening we visited a large facility which was effectively the size of 2 football pitches side by side, if you can imagine it. One half was their production plant where they made high-grade optics for submarine telescopes and things like that. The other half was their office space, which was essentially double height. And if you can imagine a large shed where the floor-to-ceiling height was 10 metres above the office space, and the building or the office space was actually lit by these large arc lamps that were suspended from the structural A-frame above the office space. And as we were going around, I asked the facilities manager, how do you change a light bulb? I guess it's one of those questions that can either be really exciting or really embarrassing, and unfortunately in this particular case it was very embarrassing. The furniture product that was on the floor was a Herman Miller product, which some of you may well be aware is very much like a Meccano set. It's all tied together, bolted together, etc. And the facilities manager basically said to me, well, what we have to do is underneath the lamp, we need to dismantle the furniture. In fact, we need to dismantle a pathway into the furniture for a cherry picker to come in, to raise up, to change the light bulb, to come back down again and rebuild the furniture. As you can imagine, that's probably a good full day's operation, and really has to be done at the weekend. Whereas, you know, thinking about it, some simple mechanism of dropping that light down to working level would easily have solved that problem. Yes, it may well have cost a lot more, or maybe not a lot more, but it would have cost more at the design and construction phase. But the point is, it would have saved that amount and more, tenfold, 100-fold, however much, during the life of that particular building. So that's really just a bit of I guess, an intro in terms of the sort of things that we're potentially trying to avoid, and the things that I'm going to be addressing as we go through this presentation. So the way I'm going to cover this is to actually look at the impact of building design on its operational phase. because obviously there is a significant impact there. What can FM contribute to avoid some of these issues that we find in our buildings? What are the barriers to FM making that contribution? And just exploring how potentially we can unify building design, build and operation professionals. So that's the sort of 4 phases, if you like, of the presentation that we will be looking at as we go through. So I've got a bit of a poll here, and the question is, for those of you who are facilities managers or have been involved with this, are you currently or have you ever been continuously involved with brief preparation through to handover on a building or major refurbishment project? So I'm just going to press the poll button. So hopefully that has come up, and we're looking. Oh, I've got to launch this. Sorry, there we go. So we're looking for you to answer yes or no. I'm just trying to get a feel for anyone that has actually had the opportunity to work with an organisation from project inception right through to operation. So if you can do that. So I think we've pretty well got almost a full response now. We've got one more coming in, and I'll just give it another couple of seconds there, because I see someone is just joining. So Alan, you've just joined us. If you'd like to maybe just respond to this poll. Basically, I'm asking, are you currently or have you ever had continuous involvement in a construction project, and therefore had input throughout the whole that whole cycle? So okay, right. So if I close this poll, we've got something like 83%. 83% of have said yes, and 17% have said no. And what I need to try now and do is get back to my presentation. Okay, bear with me a second. There we go. Right, thanks for doing that. So let's look at the cost of ownership, and I'm sure you've all seen pie charts and graphs and things like that that really illustrate what I'm trying to illustrate here is that in effect the cost of design and construction management of a building is a minuscule percentage of the total cost of the ownership over the life cycle of that building. So, you know, if we add a small amount of cost in there, it's pretty insignificant in the greater scheme of things. If we add a bit more into construction, again, it's not going to have a significant impact in terms of the whole life cycle cost of the building. So that, again, just puts it in a bit of context, is that, you know, perhaps it's worth spending a wee bit more at the early stages of the project to make sure that we minimise the operational cost of the building as we take over the building and run it through its useful life. So what is a successful design and construction outcome? And I think that's really something that is worth considering, because a successful design construction outcome is probably, the answer to that is going to be different depending on whether you're an architect, a developer, a QS or a facilities manager. But really, at the end of the day, the success is going to be meeting client requirements. I mean, that's the bottom line. Ultimately, the building is there for the client to undertake their business, whatever that business is, whether it's an office, a hospital, or whatever. So that, to me, is ultimately what that success is. And that success is going to be influenced by a number of factors. First of all, the quality of the design brief, because ultimately that's what the design team have got to work with, is the design brief. That's a statement of what their client requirements are. And if that is not clear, succinct, to the point, unambiguous, then potentially we're going to have problems as we go through. So one of the things we're looking for is a really good quality design brief. We've then got to think about the interpretation of that design brief, and I guess this kind of ties in with the first point, that if we have a poor quality design brief, then it is going to be open to interpretation by the design team, which basically means that it may actually be in contrast or contrary to what the client is actually looking for. But even with a very tight design brief, it's still potentially open for interpretation by by the design team. It's also going to be influenced by the level of monitoring during design and construction. And by monitoring, I mean monitoring by, I guess, the client to make sure that the design continues down the track that it's supposed to be going down. Because again, without that level of monitoring, it could quite easily start to diverge. And once it starts to diverge, you could end up with something that is not quite what the client was looking for. So who's responsible for this success, I wonder? At the end of the day, it's going to be the design team. They've got to be responsible for doing all of this. They're responsible for interpreting the design brief, for articulating all the nuances within it to come up with a design of a building at the end of the day. And of course, the design team's made up of a number of different disciplines, from the architect through to project manager, structural engineer, etc., etc. And depending on the project, there may well be other specialists involved in the project as well. So, what's a successful operational outcome? Having decided on what a successful design is going to be, what about the operational outcomes of the process? So, to me, again, success is maximising the value to the occupier or the building user. So, making sure that the building is usable, it helps the business that is occupying the facility to operate efficiently and effectively. That to me is success. And that's going to be influenced by a number of things as well. First of all, it's going to be influenced by how the organisational objectives are interpreted, because ultimately the building, as I said earlier, the building is there to support the business. Therefore, the organisational objectives should be driving what that building looks like and how it operates. It's going to be influenced by the support of the day-to-day business processes. So, and by that I mean things like the maintenance schedules, etc. So again, maximum value to the building occupier is only going to be achieved when we've got these day-to-day business processes working efficiently and effectively. And the only way that that can happen is if the building has been delivered in accordance with requirements, in accordance with specification. It's going to be influenced by coordination of trades and consultants, making sure that we've got the right people on board at the right time, etc., etc. And ultimately, as I've already hinted at, it's going to be influenced by the quality of the building. So if we don't get a good quality building, it's not going to achieve organisational objectives, it's not going to effectively support business processes, and it's actually going to be really potentially more difficult to coordinate all those trades and consultants. So who's responsible for this success? And it may come as no surprise that it's the facilities manager. So I'm going to introduce you to the facilities manager that I'm going to be using throughout this presentation. Here we are here. I do apologise about the cheesy grin, but he's obviously happy about something, and maybe we can explore that later. So anyway, this is our facilities manager, and he's responsible for day-to-day operations. He's responsible for coordinating all these trades and consultants and everything else like that. So we will see our friendly facilities manager again very shortly. Excuse me a second, I'm just going to take a quick swig of water here. Okay, so if we sort of think about the life cycle of a building in broadly 3 phases, I know it's a bit more than that, but let's just try and keep it simple. First stage being design and construction, second stage being operation, and the third stage being end of life. And of course these are a bit out of proportion because in effect that operational phase is in relative terms much longer than what is shown here. So what have we got? During the design and construction phase, we have the design team. So we've got the architect, we've got the civil engineer, we've got the QS, etc., busy working away trying to interpret the brief. Traditionally, what we've seen is that once the building is once it's been designed, the builder comes in, builds the building, and then it's handed over to the facilities manager. The facilities manager has then got an exceedingly quick learning curve to get up to be able to manage and operate this building, particularly also because the chances are he's not been handed very good operational manuals or accurate as-built drawings and all sorts of stuff. And I'm sure, again, you're all familiar with those sorts of headaches. So inevitably, our facilities manager will be supported by a number of consultants, which may not necessarily be the same consultants that were involved with the project during the design and construction phase, but nonetheless, they'll be there. And then, as we get to the end of the operational life of the building, now that may be at a point where the business outgrows it rather than the building becoming obsolete or whatever, but then certainly for this organisation it comes to the end of life. And again, the facilities manager is going to be responsible for closing that down, and again potentially supported by consultants, which again may not necessarily be the consultants that were either appointed during the operational phase or during the design and construction. So you probably all noticed that there's a bit of a gap at the design and construction phase, and really what I'm saying is that that gap in a way could and should be filled by the facilities manager, and that can achieve a number of really useful things, apart from which, many of which I'll be talking about, but the main one being is that it will provide continuity. So really what we're going to be focusing on is that first stage in terms of what can facilities management as a discipline contribute to the design and construction phases, and what are the barriers to facilities managers getting involved at that level. Now I've got to be honest, when I started out to prepare this presentation, excuse me a second, I was of the view that potentially there was a lot of resistance from the design team to having the involvement of the facilities management discipline as an integral part of their team. And as you'll see as we progress through the rest of this presentation, my view kind of changed ever so slightly. So we'll be exploring why and how during the rest of this session. So let's think about the FM contribution. On the one side, we've got the client, which runs a business. And that business comprises a number of things, which is primarily driven by a vision and a mission of that business and supported by various strategies, systems and processes. And essentially, we then have a building which will accommodate that organisation. And as I said earlier, that building needs to be able to support that business as efficiently and effectively as possible. So two entirely different things, and somehow we've got to get the two of them working together, working towards the same common goal, which is effectively business success. So we've got the client, which will generally be represented by, if you're lucky, one individual. If you're really unlucky, it could be a committee or board of management or something like that. And again, I'm sure you've all dealt with boards of management and getting conflicting information and feedback, etc., etc. However, that's something that we have to live with, unfortunately. And then on the other hand, we've got the building, and the people involved with that is back to our design team again, our architects, our surveyors, our structural engineers, etc., etc. So really what I'm saying is that one of the primary roles that our friend, the facilities manager, can fulfill, and the value that he can bring to this, is an understanding of both. So, the facility, and there's a lot of talk about competencies of facilities managers. Should they be on the technical side? Should they be on the management side of things, etc., etc. Really, I'm coming at this from suggesting that really facilities management needs a good grasp of the technical aspects of a building, but also a really good grasp of business processes, business strategy, etc., etc. Because that role, in terms of understanding both of those, creates the essential link between the client and the building. And I'll put it to you that if we can get that link going from day one, then we're going to get a building that's much better going to is going to support the organisation in a much, much better way. I've just got a bit of a question here, and despite what David said at the beginning, and David knew I was going to do this, I'm actually happy to take questions as we go through, and I perhaps should have said that up front. So I'll maybe just take a pause there and try and answer this question here. And it says, in the context of presentation and within a leased property scenario, how do you think the need for maximising value to both the owner and the occupier, i.e. the lessee, can be achieved given that we want to maximise the length of the lease and the occupier will rather want flexibility to fit in with the pace of change in the business these days? Yeah, look, that's a really good question, Graham, and essentially, yes, there is a difference between a leased building and an owner-occupied building, but effectively, I guess my response to that is that if it's going to be a leased building, we need to make sure that that building is flexible. So, in a way, you've got a different sort of client there, which has got to understand that there's potentially going to be a whole series of different business needs that are going to be a lot shorter lived within the building. Therefore, the building needs to definitely support that. So it needs to be designed with that in mind. So hopefully that answers that bit of a question. If not, we can come back to it later on. But nonetheless, in that sort of situation as well, you know, we need someone to be able to articulate the business need into something that the design and technical experts are going to be able to understand and make something out of it. So the FM contribution, what we got? The FM contribution will ensure that the design process does not compromise business objectives, and you know that's a pretty sort of tall order, I guess, at the end of the day. But we need to set out with that level of intent because ultimately, as I say, the building is there to support the business. Inevitably, there could well be design changes as the project goes on, as the design phase goes on. But if there's a facility, an FM involvement there, at least those changes can be considered in relation to their impact on the future operation of the building. So there is some sort of a check, if you like, in terms of, yes, those design changes are acceptable, or accepting them as a compromise, understanding the full impact on the future operation of the building. So this means that the facilities manager is actually learning about all this stuff and understanding about all this stuff before he's even handed the building at the end of the construction phase. But also facility management can suggest alternative solutions from the perspective of operating the building. Because again, FM has got the expertise in running buildings. I'm sure you'll all agree with that. So there's been a learning process there and an understanding of how things can work or not work within a building, and that intelligence can be fed into the design team and again hopefully result in a much better product at the end of the day. And then reviewing handover information. As I said at the beginning, you know, there are issues with and again you've all experienced them, I'm sure, in terms of the quality of handover information from the design team and the contractor once the keys are handed over. So again, that early involvement will help to develop that information in a way that's going to be much more useful and potentially a lot more accurate for the facilities manager at the point of handover. So there are some benefits from a client perspective. They're handed a building that fully supports their strategic objectives, which is fantastic. For a facilities manager here, you'll have a full understanding of how the building works and of any compromises that are made along the way. And I think the important part there are the compromises, so that he understands what they are and why they have arisen. And I think that's actually really important. From a design team point of view, the benefits are that they get timely decision making, and a client in the form of the facility manager that can talk their language. So articulating the business speak into something that they can understand. So there are benefits on all sides as far as an early involvement of FM in the design and construction process. So what about the barriers? What about the brick walls that are preventing FM from getting involved with the design and construction stages? As I said earlier, I started off by thinking there were going to be significant barriers in relation to, or coming from, if you like, the design team. And as I went through, I'm thinking, well, are these actually barriers or not? So let's look at this brick wall and wonder whether it really is a brick wall or just something that is a figment of our imagination. So first of all, I've got another poll here. Again, what we'll do is I will, bear with me a second, we'll launch this poll. So basically, which of the following prevents organisations from including FM in design and construction? 1, poor understanding of the executive of the value, by the executive of the value FM can deliver. 2, the cost of the FM resource. 3, a lack of in-house FM expertise. Or 4, resistance from the design team. So we'll just launch that now, and we'll get some responses from you. Okay, we've had a 71% vote on this so far, 86%. And interesting results. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Okay, so we've actually got a situation where 100% are saying number 1, poor understanding of the executive. I do that. So 100% poor understanding by the executive of the value of FM. 100% of you are saying that. So that's very interesting. Okay, so if I do that and get back to there we go. So thanks for doing that, really appreciate it, interesting result. So moving on, let's look at some of the considerations from a client perspective. But perhaps there is something to do with the cost of additional resource, which in a way ties in with the third bullet point there, level of in-house expertise, because if there isn't the required level of in-house expertise, then potentially they're going to have to buy that in. But even if there is that level of in-house expertise, somehow the organisation is going to have to backfill the day-to-day responsibilities and be able to release that expertise to focus on the design and construction phase, because potentially it's not a part-time job. We're looking at something that could potentially be pretty full-time here. That's not to be underestimated. The level of understanding the value FM can deliver, and that's obviously come out as the highest one. Maybe there's something else. If you can think of anything, just drop them into the chat box, which is down at the bottom of your right-hand column there. Just type in a message and send it to the entire audience. That would be really good. So yeah, if you can think of anything else from a client point of view, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Design team considerations. It's going to make the design team, I believe, a lot more accountable if you've got the facility manager sitting there as part of your design team meetings and decision-making processes, etc., etc. Because the facilities manager hopefully is going to not just sit there, but he's actually going to be challenging. He's going to be saying why and how much and when and all those sorts of potentially awkward questions of the design team. So yes, I believe that FM sitting as part of the project team will provide greater accountability. It will also result in greater transparency as well. Again, going back to understanding why design changes are made, you know, the reasoning and the logic behind them. And then we get to some of the considerations of the facilities manager. First of all, understanding design team responsibilities. So, you know, does the facilities manager have a really good grasp of what the design team is all about and what the individual responsibilities are of the various disciplines that are sitting there? If that understanding doesn't exist, then it's going to be quite a rocky road to getting integrated into the design team. Similarly, with understanding the design team processes and dynamics, how do these things work? design teams can be quite challenging to work with. Therefore, you need to approach that in a different way, as I've suggested in the third bullet point there, which is adoption of a different mindset to that of delivering services. So, I guess the question we've got to ask ourselves here is, is the sort of run-of-the-mill, if I can use that expression, I apologise if it's offending anybody, but the sort of run-of-the-mill, sort of traditional standard facilities manager, if there is such a thing, is that person capable of stepping into this role? I'll leave that as a bit of a rhetorical question at the moment. But it's something that an organisation needs to consider. It's an aspect that the FM team has to consider as well. Because if not, then potentially you're going to have to buy that in. And it goes back to cost again. So, what about unifying that team? How can we actually move forward and try and get that team working together? First of all, if we think about all the stakeholders, I think we need to think about changing attitudes and actions to establishing working relationships based on mutual respect and trust. And we also, if we can achieve that, I think that's a major step forward. I was sitting in on one of the sessions at 6 o'clock in the morning, my time this morning, and certainly one of the key things that were talked about, that was the panel session, one of the key things that we're talking about there in terms of working with consultants is trust. If we don't have that trust, then potentially we're going to end up with some issues. As far as the design team in FM is concerned, each side needs to take time to develop their understanding of the value of the respective contributions, and also take time to understand the respective strengths. So it's basically getting to know each other and building relationships, which ultimately is going to result in either success or failure, depending on how that relationship. However, I also feel that there are other aspects to this as well. First of all, things are going to be driven by the client. Selection of the design team. There is a responsibility on the organisation, if they accept that facilities management is going to be part of the design and construction process. There is a responsibility to make sure that the design team that is selected for this project is actually receptive and open to the concept of FM being involved. So that needs to be part of one of the parameters that is used to select a design team. They also need to make sure that the necessary funds are available. As I said earlier, the amount of additional cost to have FM involved during those early stages is minimal in relation to the overall cost of the life cycle cost of the building. But nonetheless, potentially, to add another percentage of fees to cover the cost of FM could be quite significant at that particular point in time. But also making sure that the appropriate resources are committed to the project. So, if there is going to be FM involvement, as I said earlier, it's potentially not part-time involvement or not part-time role, it's potentially full-time. And it's making sure that the resources are freed up to be able to do that without other distractions and being drawn off it to do other things, etc. So there's got to be a commitment there from the client to make this work as well from the organisation. I also believe that there is a role for the industry and the profession at professional body association level to take steps to try to get this unification going as well. As I said at the beginning in my bio, I'm a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. I don't know if many of you are familiar with RICS in reasonable detail, but essentially it comprises a number of different professional groups, if you like. So you have quantity surveyors, you have valuers, you have building surveyors, and yes, you've got facilities managers as well. Having joined RICS, what I have found is that those professional groups tend to work in pretty tight silos. And even within that same organisation, there isn't necessarily a good understanding of what those other silos do. So to me, it's actually up to the organisation itself to start breaking those down through creating forums where that are multidisciplinary, where valuers can share ideas with quantity surveyors, which can then also share ideas with facilities managers. But it's also understanding, improving the understanding of what those other disciplines do. So, the facilities managers really fully understand what a valuer does. Do they fully understand what a QS does, etc., etc. And then finally, I think the professional and industry bodies can really work hard at promoting the concept of a mutual aim of delivering high-performance buildings. And I think this goes back also then to not just trying to break silos down within an organisation like RICS, but also trying to cross-fertilise, if you like, between different professions. So, RICS setting up forums with the architects, with the engineers, that type of thing. So again, trying to get that cross-discipline awareness going through those sorts of initiatives as well. Okay, and I think really just, we're almost at the end of this, and I think there are actually 3 more very significant considerations when we're talking about integrating FM into design and construction processes, and I just want to dwell on those for 5 or so minutes, and then we'll be able to take a few questions and hopefully come to a conclusion. So the first one is building information modelling. Excuse me, I'm just going to take another sip of water. So we're all familiar with BIM. It is becoming very much integrated into design and construction, and we're starting to see its use in the operational phase or during the operational phases of the building. So this, in a way, opens up, I guess, an opportunity and a real driver, if you like, for FM to get involved at the beginning. Because if we actually think about what building information modelling really does for us, when we hand over, if we've got if the building has been designed using some sort of BIM technology, then the information that we're going to get handed over to us is going to be a lot more accurate, or 100% accurate. The operational manuals, the O&M manuals that we're getting, are going to be directly linked to that, so therefore they're going to be accurate as well. So the building information modelling effectively becomes building information management once we get to handover, and it becomes an absolutely critical and really valuable resource for facilities managers in being able to operate their building effectively and efficiently. So it makes absolute sense for the facilities manager to be on that journey from the word go, to be involved from the point of writing the brief, through to the building information model being developed, and through all its design phases, etc., etc., through into being able to take that information into managing the building. So what effectively will happen is that handover will be totally seamless in terms of the handover of information. The building will operate very effectively and efficiently from day one, because the FM resource is already understanding how the building is going to work and what's going to make it tick. So I see that as being a real enabler, if you like, for FM to get involved as early as possible. So I think that's one piece of technology that I think is very important. The second one is the Internet of Things, is the technologies where assets effectively are going to self-monitor and tell facilities managers, hey, I need maintained, or I need replaced, or something like that. Again, in terms of how that's going to work during the operational phase is going to be influenced very directly by the way it's all going to be designed and installed, etc. So again, I see that those technologies and smart buildings and everything are really serious enablers for, or seriously good reasons for facilities managers to get involved from day one. Again, so there's an understanding. I mean, it's like, a building is like being handed a car. It's pretty complex, and if you haven't been involved with, had some training or been involved with designing or developing it, then it makes it a bit more difficult to understand how the whole thing works. I've got to be honest, these days I lift up the bonnet of my car and I look at it and I think, well, that doesn't look like an engine to me, but certainly it is, because it drives the car. So the Internet of Things, definitely something that we need to consider. And then the final one, I believe that may have an impact here, is the ISO standard, which is going to be finally launched at the end of next year in its complete state. I know there are 2 parts being launched this year, but ultimately there are going to be standards, formal standards, that facilities managers are going to have to comply with, and they need to make sure that the way the building is designed is actually going to support their ability to comply with those standards. So, as I say, I think there's 3 things here which I believe are going to make a bit of a difference and are going to really start driving a much greater FM involvement in design and construction processes. So really, just to wrap up, to me there's a win-win-win situation with FM being involved in those early stages. First of all, for the organisation gets a building that productively supports its business, which can only be a good thing. For the facilities manager, a facility that's easy to maintain and operate. And if it's easy to maintain and operate, it's going to be less stressful, it's going to take less time, etc. I think one of the biggest complaints I hear from facilities managers is that they work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, you've got to ask the question why, but maybe that's a subject for another conversation. And then the win for the design team is that they get a building that's both aesthetically and functionally well designed. And again, I'm sure we can all think of examples where buildings look fantastic, but they leak like a sieve and they don't support the business well. So let's get some sanity into this process. Let's get the facilities management function involved during the design and construction processes, and as I say, hopefully everybody's happy. So that really is the formal part of the presentation. I'm very happy to take questions. David, do you want to field those at all?
Actually, I think we can both see them, but let me suggest something, Martin. I can open the mics. We only have a small group, there's about 8 or 10 of us. Would you like me to?
No, I'm happy to do that, no problem at all.
Let me do that.
Because Graham's got another statement. I don't know whether it's a statement or a question, but maybe if Graham can maybe address what he's...
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that. I haven't done this before, but we will see. Let's see, there goes Alan, should be, yep. And there goes Andrew, Gay, Graham, Juan Jose. Whoops, it looks like I opened somebody with a noise in the background. No, maybe not. Marcus. And Val. Good. So at the moment we have open mic all around. Martin, if you'd like to... anyone who'd like to bring up a comment or discussion, why, go ahead.
Martin, I have a comment. It's Gay Tuttle here.
Hi, Gay.
I thought that was a very interesting presentation, and wondered if you'd encountered some things that I'd seen recently here in Oklahoma, where two new building owners who were previously major tenants in another space didn't really have an FM presence to bring to the table while they were building the building. And in certain ways, I think that really shows in the functionality of their new space. Have you encountered that yourself? And how do you overcome that kind of a hurdle?
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right, and you know, there are still a lot of organisations that embark on major projects, whether they're new build or major refurbishments, without that level of involvement. And I think there's a number, as I've said in the presentation, there are a number of reasons for that. But that said, I believe that the part of the role of the consultants out there, FM consultants, can very easily step in and take that role on. And if I can maybe just give you an example from my dim and distant past back in Scotland, where the Scottish Court Service, which the law courts, they look after all the law courts in Scotland. They were refurbishing one of their courts in the west of Scotland, and they approached me to take on the role of effectively project sponsor, because they felt that they didn't have the expertise there to effectively manage the design team. So what I was able to do there was effectively take on the role that I've been talking about, but in a way it was great, because it was full of authority but no responsibility. It was ideal. But you know, there are specialist consultants that would be able to plug those gaps. Gay, does that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And in fact, that was my foray into contract work, was to offer that service. I think it's interesting that there are a lot of times where company executives don't have someone on their team that they trust and or value that can give them that input to keep from stubbing their toes in a huge expense when they're building a building. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely, and I guess this goes back to the sort of question about how much does senior executives really value facilities management, facilities managers, and building productive relationships in that direction.
Well, thanks for a great presentation tonight, Martin.
My pleasure, Gay. Graham, do you want to talk to the comment that you put in there?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I echo what Gay said. Very interesting presentation, and that's a number of buttons for me in terms of my experience.
We need to speak up a bit.
Can you hear me now?
That's a bit better.
Yeah, look, I echo what Gay was saying. It's a very interesting presentation, and it hits a lot of buttons in terms of my experience. But I have a question for you and maybe some of the others. Look, it occurs to me that value management practitioner would be well placed to cover off some of your points in terms of, you know, ensuring stakeholder value, unifying the multidisciplinary team, getting the scope and design right. In your experience, do you think the value management practitioner is given suitable opportunity to be involved at the design stage? And if so, should the FM practitioner be so skilled or experienced? And when I talk about value management, I don't mean value engineering or cost cutting that often goes on during construction, where often, you know, functionality is lost. I'm talking about value management that's done at the design stage.
Yeah. Look, I absolutely agree, and I think it's a very valuable skill for facilities managers to have, is that sort of approach to value engineering, because you know, value management, should I say, rather than value engineering, because value management is also, it's not solely about costs and cost cutting. Value management is really going to take into account that cost and use as well. But even taking that out of the frame, you know, the value management exercise can really nut out issues like accessibility, ease of maintaining, and all that sort of stuff. But yes, I'd be interested if anybody else has got any comments on that one.
Marcus, are you there? No, that's.
Oh,
go ahead, Gay.
I was just going to weigh in on that one again. I think that I feel like a little responsibility goes back to the actual design team and or the architectural team in having an interest in how well their design performs and checking after the fact. I find that to be a rare occurrence among only really the highest level teams, and it's something that I also think adds greatly to the success of a project.
Absolutely spot on there, Dave. And yeah, I mean, most design teams, they hand over the keys and then they run for miles, you know. Can't see them for dust.
Yeah. Excuse me just a second. Those in attendance, I've got a little bit of background noise. Not quite sure what it is, perhaps a highway. And if you wouldn't mind muting your mics except when you talk, I'll leave you all in the turned on. So if you would, still picking it up. It might be internal in the system. Andrew, can you? And Juan Jose? It's one of the two. It's all right. It's not terribly difficult, so we can go ahead. Back over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I've actually I've muted both Andrew and Juan Jose.
Yeah, it was one of the two.
Anyway,
Right?
yeah.
Okay, good. We can turn them back on. Juan Jose and Andrew, if you'd like to speak up, just raise your hand. Use the hand raising, and we'll pick you right up.
Okay, so yeah, look, I think value engineering and value management principles very much part of the arsenal of the facilities manager, and really, you know, if we can get that level of understanding at the design and construction phase, then it's actually a really valuable skill to have once we get into the operational phase as well, to be quite honest, because I can think of numerous situations where during the life cycle of a building that those skills will be very useful. Okay, Juan Jose, I've unmuted you.
There's the hand, right?
Go ahead.
Okay, no, it was an excellent question. I thank you much.
Sorry, Juan Jose, but that really hasn't come through at all. I think we've got a bit of a ropey connection there. It's,
Might have to type that one.
I reckon.
Yeah, type that one down in the questions. Thank you. Sorry.
So while Juan Jose is doing that, anybody got anything else to say?
Can
Yeah, we have a few minutes left. We're coming up on about 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go. We could stretch it a little bit. I don't think the power.
okay,
Yeah.
I think everything.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah, you'd have to type, Juan Jose, type in the questions in the chat box at the bottom.
I don't have.
Martin, while
Okay,
we're
I don't very much.
I think I'm just going to mute Juan Jose. Sorry, Juan Jose.
Okay, sorry, right.
Okay.
Well,
Any final words, Graham?
yeah, look, on the value management side of things, we all know the challenges that we have getting FM recognized. Value management is the same. Value management achieves the greatest value when it's actually involved at conception and design.
Absolutely.
If you get a designer, an architect to put forward designs and then test it using value engineering, it still doesn't achieve that same level of value. I wish I had able to show you a graph that shows where value is best achieved, and it really is at concept and design stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as the design and construction moves forward, there's less opportunity to make changes. It's as simple as that.
That's right, and it can alter the functionality profile and the value profile. Where value is, seen as the performance of the function of the building over cost, because cost is often excluded during value management exercises because it's a means to an end rather than an end, and it can often influence creativity as well if cost is brought in at the early stage.
Absolutely, good point. Excellent.
I could certainly testify from my conversations with Marcus that he feels that way as well. Well, how are we doing? Should put a wrap on it?
I reckon that's probably not a bad idea, David. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, y'all. If you'd let me first of all, I will shut off the mics. And Martin, if you could give me the next slide. Just tell Sarah goodbyes here with a few reminders. First of all, FMCC does offer the scholarship in Kit Tuvison's name, and we are taking applications. FMCC Workplace and our FMCC.IFMA.org provides guidance for that. It's a fairly hefty bit of support. Next slide. Also a reminder that the Strategic and Tactical Action Group in FMCC is always thirsty for volunteers, and Gay Tuttle is on the line tonight, and she would certainly welcome your interest if you would work in that area. We do rather a variety of things, and all of them entertaining, and we'd appreciate it. Next slide. If you're frequently on Twitter, do use the hashtag WorldFMDay. And let's see, we're pretty much expired now as to the event itself, but be alert and use it if you will. Next slide. In about 1 hour, Val Morris will host and I will host a session, just wrapping up the now 17. We had one cancellation webinars in the last 24 hours. Excuse me, 31 hours. Next slide. Showing our recognition and respect for the other IFMA councils of industry councils. Next slide. And thank you for joining us. I think it's lights out. Thanks very much, Martin, for your presentation tonight. I know it hit right at the roots of all of us in FM. I mean, all of us at one time or another been involved in construction, and long may it be that way. Okay, well, good night, everyone.
And thank you, everyone.